Welcome. In 2010, I was in the first year of my PhD in the UK. I was a smug leftist. I thought I knew everything, and I thought that my only mission was to enlighten everyone about how they're wrong and how I am right. At some point, 3 months in, my friend Ashley told me that there is a festival in London and that I should definitely go because there are some very cool people there who, number one, still believe in human agency, and number two, still believe in revolution. Now, I couldn't care less about the human agency part, but I thought, oh, revolution, these people are probably, let's check them out. So I go to the Battle of Ideas, and I have to say, I hated it for two reasons. Number one, it was the first time that I saw people disagreeing with me and actually telling it in my face, taking me seriously that, you know what, dude, you're wrong, and here's why you're wrong. So I remember a discussion where I told people, the public should pay for my PhD. And there was someone who said, why? And then I thought, oh, I haven't got an answer. But also, the other issue is that how can someone be a progressive, as these people claim they are, and believe in things like the working class doesn't need the protection of intellectuals like myself, or that people should be free to take decisions about their life? So these were very hard to swallow pills for me. Of course, I found also some people with whom I could connect ideologically. There was a Malthusian guy who thought that the population of the earth needs to be significantly smaller. So it wasn't a completely negative experience. So I went back. I remember even in social media was complaining, oh, everyone is neoliberal these days. Why did I lose my time with this festival? Anyway, some months later, my friend poked me again. You have to come again. We have these fantastic meetings. These people even read Marx Capital and they do a very close reading. So something had changed in me slowly. I don't know. So I go again to these organizational meetings for the Battle of Ideas. And although I was in a university, that was the one space where I could actually have interesting discussions. So slowly I started entering to getting accustomed to this atmosphere of putting my ideas on the table and trying to test them. But I kept poking Claire and telling her, you know what, you're not radical enough, you need to do this. And at some point, Claire says, okay, you have all these ideas, get more involved. You want to organize something in Greece. We can have a satellite battle event in Athens. So this happened in 2011. 1 week later, it was the first time that I spoke in the London Battle of Ideas because someone dropped out from a panel and I was a substitute speaker. And the rest is history. For the next 12 years, I think, I was a part of all the events that happened except the two during COVID. So why did I say that being part of the Battle of Ideas changed my life? The first thing is, the very obvious thing is that that's where I met Razi. That's where I met Yaron Brook. And that's where I met for the first time people with whom later I associated in the objectivist community. On a more superficial level, the Battle of Ideas was the first place where I could test myself as a wannabe public intellectual. Talk to people and see people coming back to me with objections and actually trying to have to take myself seriously, that this is a space which is no BS. You say something, if we don't like it, we're going to actually challenge you. But also, and that's the most important, it was the first time that I was part of an intellectual community. And living in a culture like the one we live today, particularly if you work in academia, as I did, where you might feel alone, where you might feel that no one is taking my ideas seriously, no one is trusting a human agency, no one is talking about free speech. I mean, many people are today, but back in the day, it was very few people who were doing that. So being part of this group of courageous people, of people who would speak up, who would publicly speak up about these things, gave me a lot of courage. It gave me the courage to go back to the university and actually become more a braver person in terms of how I viewed myself as a public kind of intellectual, for the lack of a better term. So this is my experience with the Battle of Ideas. And today we have two people who are integral in this project. The one is Claire Fox. You've probably seen Claire we've had her in the past in our programs. She's also a member of the House of Lords, which is a huge homage to her. But for me, she's always the person the mastermind behind the Battle of Ideas. And I think this is the biggest honor that that Claire can get from all of us who know and love her. And also, Mo Lovatt, Mo is also part of the team. She's going to talk to us a bit more about the Battle of Ideas. So the event is taking place in London next weekend. And not only I encourage everyone to attend, there is also a discount code that Daniel is going to put in the chat. So Mo, 1 week, 8 days from now, why would someone take the train and come to the Battle of Ideas? What is in offer, and how would you, what is the thing that one should look forward to?
Yeah, well, I think, thanks, Nikos. I think it's my experience with the Battle of Ideas is very similar, because I came as an ordinary punter before I started working for the Academy of Ideas. So I'd kind of endorse quite a lot of what you said there. It is one of those spaces where you can have your own views challenged and you can challenge other people's views. And actually, I got involved during my PhD as well. And the downside is it makes academia feel very stale, because there's a lot of paradigms and there's a lot of echo chambers, and you don't always have your views challenged. And so you come away thinking, either I know why I think what I think more, it can make you strengthen your own views, but it can also challenge you and make you modify your views as well. So that it is sort of life-changing. And even if your first experience, like yours, Nikos, isn't, you're not 100%, you come back, you keep coming back, because there's something addictive about it. And why I think it's particularly important at the moment is particularly when we live in culture war times. And I don't know about other people, yourself, Claire, other people listening, but I find that it's much harder to have meaningful political discussions now. And I find myself getting slightly triggered, which is something I've historically never done. The kind of culture wars, they polemicize us, they can make us feel a bit tribal. And it's a real good buffer against that, because it's robust debate. Our motto is free speech allowed, but it's also civilized debate, and the weight of the intellectual people that come along, and I'm talking about the people in the audience as well as the people we invite onto the panels, keeps it from being civilized but and robust. So that's one of the reasons I personally like it. The other thing is that it's a conversation, and yes, it takes place in London, in Westminster, 15th and 16th of October this year, but it's a conversation that happens throughout the year. So a lot of the strands that we've selected this year, we have sort of what we call sessions, those are the panel debates. They sit in strands that have been very carefully thought about, not just from ourselves, but people who kind of come to our meetings. So there'll be a lot on the culture wars. In fact, I think the Ayn Rand Centre is partnering with us on the US midterm and what the hell's happening in America right now. There will be strands on free speech, as you say, it's something that's always been a passion of ours, because without free speech, you can't interrogate ideas. But other things that perhaps people have been thinking about, like, why do so many of our institutions feel in meltdown at the moment? Why did Sussex police tell somebody off for misgendering somebody who committed a heinous crime? What's happening in social work? What's happening in the police force? What's happening in the civil service? So it is that conversation. So the strands themselves feel, to me personally, very pertinent to lots of the issues that we probably talk about down the pub in our lecture theatres in university as well. So that would be my reason for coming and getting on the train.
So you mentioned the strands. So people need to understand that what happens in the Battle of Ideas is, imagine that every hour you have 4 or 5 different events taking place. So one event might be something about the culture wars. Another event might be something about art. So in the past, there have been discussions about particular operas, particular pieces of art. Then another debate could be something on politics. So there's always something happening for someone who has a particular interest in one topic. So there are these, let's say, keynote big events when we talk about the big events of the day. But no matter what is of interest to anyone, you can find something. Quite often there's a discussion on football. Our own Razi Ginsberg this year is involved in a discussion on football. By the way, 4 people this year from the objectivist community are going to be there. Myself, Yaron, Don Watkins, and Razi. However, even if you are not there, I think there are important lessons from the battle of ideas in terms of how we change the culture, because this is what we see as our mission and our calling, let's say, or something that we are passionate about. And so, Claire, you were the person behind, one of the people behind the first battle of ideas. Tell us a bit how you see it now in retrospect. First of all, tell us a bit when it started. And now that you see it from, let's say, a distance, and you have achieved things, big things have happened in the UK, like Brexit, free speech now is a top issue on the agenda. When you see it in retrospect, how do you evaluate the role of such spaces and such communities? And what are the lessons to be drawn in terms of someone fighting for a better society, for a better future?
Well, I suppose one thing to say to you is it's been going for 17 years, and maybe it will be an inspiration to people to know that when we announced, or when I sort of said, got a group of us and we said we were going to have a Battle of Ideas festival in London, everybody laughed and said, oh, London, there's so much going on. There's no point having that kind of thing. It'll be a complete waste. And in fact, there was even an article in the national newspaper about all these people who try and do things in London around ideas. It just doesn't work on the very year that we were, like 2 months ahead. And we were very small and we were very impoverished, and we had an idea. And I suppose the first lesson is that you can have an idea that becomes a reality. Sometimes people just think that you can be idealist, but actually if you work hard, you can make something real. So we created something called the Battle of Ideas Festival that really now exists 17 years later. And whereas there was only a kind of a couple of hundred people then, now we're going to get, well over 2,000 people over the weekend, which I hope you'll all come and join and so on. And one of the things that's changed, Nikos, is that whereas there used to be like 5 things you could choose from, now there's like something like 10 or 11 sessions all at the same time. So it's an enormous program, 100 panel debates, 400 speakers over one weekend. So we pack a lot in. In terms of what it was and what it is, I mean, the reason why myself and others set it up was because we wanted to create, if you want, a more intelligent public square. Right. Even then, 17 years ago, we were aware of the fact that managerialism was sucking the life out of intellectual life. That in those days, it was spin doctors and people being very technocratic about politics. I mean, some of that's still true. And you could begin to see the erosion of free speech. When you think about how that has taken on a pace, the Battle of Ideas is more important than ever. And also, I mean, goodness, if we learned nothing else from lockdown, we remember, we can realize what it's like when you are completely socially demobilized and isolated and have no public square, right? So this is even more important now to cling on to that. And I think that there's a sense of solidarity in that, in sort of bringing people together who really are intellectually curious, are prepared to go out and argue and listen, very important. But as Mo explained, these are public conversations. Yes, we have panels and we're going to have great speakers like Nikos and Yaron and so on, but they're not there as experts, right? They are there to kickstart a public conversation. And so the audience in the Battle of Ideas aren't sitting there passively twiddling their thumbs. They then join in. And that's why a lot of the speakers enjoy it so much, because they enjoy it, but it's terrifying because the audience are considered as equals. Nikos not going to get away with kind of talking rubbish, right? Nikos will make a speech and there'll be people, everybody from the bright 18-year-old to the kind of rather wise 80-year-old philosopher who'll just say, you're talking rubbish, Nikos. I mean, they might say you're talking brilliant stuff, Nikos. What I mean is we don't have experts lecturing ordinary people. So in that sense, it's a genuine public conversation. And the sense of solidarity is not that you all agree with each other, because that's an echo chamber. The sense of solidarity is that you take each other seriously, that we're trying to gather together. So I really want people listening to understand why it's worth coming, because you really kind of this is a gathering of people who are serious about the world, not po-faced serious, not self-regarding serious. Always good to have a sense of humor. Always good to have a bit of a light touch, but serious about ideas, who want to change things. Because I think even just being with other people who see the importance of being challenged and challenging, of understanding the importance of persuading other people rather than caricaturing them and dismissing them and setting up straw men. I mean, Nikos, that was very funny, your introduction, but you know, it's kind of like, this is a revolutionary, this is a Marxist, this is even an objectivist. I mean, half the time these labels don't work for people, but embodying those ideas by making them come alive to people and really having your ideas tested, I think makes for a much more intelligent political atmosphere. And we're not going to survive. Those of us who really want to change the world, we might disagree on what it is we're trying to change. That's not the point. Those of us who are kind of passionate about improving the world, ensuring that individuals are not stamped upon by a sense of conformity and orthodoxy, not just by the state, but just a mood in which you are told to comply to a particular set of ideas, very narrowly prescribed. Those of us who are really serious about that, we have to be better at our job, right? But we've got a tough job on. And so I hope that what the festival does is to allow those us to hone our skills, as it were, in that atmosphere. And what we achieved, the main thing I would say is that on a range of topics where we've been told that you can't say that, and that could be gender critical issues, it could be some of the more egregious aspects of identity politics, for example, around critical race theory. It could be around environmentalism, where it became such an orthodoxy that even anyone arguing for progress or for economic growth was dubbed a climate change denier and so on. All of these things. What we did was we said, no, we're not having that. We're going to discuss the things that you say we can't discuss. And we're, you know, I'm from the left. There are people from the right. There are people who don't have a label. And we are grown up enough to take these issues on. And at the very least, I hope that what the Battle of Ideas has done is carved out a space for people to ask awkward questions, and that free speech and the ability to think freely, speak freely, and not get closed down by somebody saying, I find that offensive. I think we actually have popularized that. And that's very important. So we're a small organization. We punch above our weight, but we've had an influence. And you're right, Nikos, I don't care about being in the House of Lords. It's a kind of, you know, an unelected second legislative chamber in the UK, even though it's enormous, is not what I'm interested in. The Academy of Ideas is my work. But I think it's interesting to note that the Academy of Ideas was recognised by me being given a position in the House of Lords, because they actually said, well, you're the kind of person who might go in and, you know, stir it up a bit and be a free speech. You won't be owned by anyone. That was what they said when they offered it me. And they noted the importance of the Battle of Ideas in free speech terms. And they also said the same about Brexit. And again, a similar reason I say this is because Brexit was the decision to leave the European Union in the UK was set up by a UK government who basically called a referendum with the assumption that they would win the referendum to stay in the EU. The plan was never that people would think for themselves and leave the EU. I mean, what happened there? And it became, as we know, almost civil war territory, metaphorically, in terms of the way that the establishment then tried to smash the Brexit vote after it happened when they lost it democratically. And again, that shows you that ordinary people and the strength of ideas can really change the course of history. And again, I think the Academy of Ideas, which has been discussing some of these issues around democracy and sovereignty for many years before it was fashionable, before there was ever a referendum called, gave people a grounding in the idea that these things are more than a soundbite or a meme, and that if you actually do a bit of reading and thinking about it, you can actually change the way that people understand things like borders and national sovereignty and so on. So, God, I've rambled on. I want you all to be there, because the more of us who are there together, the more influence we're going to have. It's as simple as that. And it's also great fun to be with people who just are not going to storm out and say, I find that offensive.
So two things to concretize so that people understand exactly what we're talking about. You talked about the participation of the audience. So the format in a usual conference is after the talk, each person asks a question. Sometimes it's not even a question, it's a second speech. And then you go through 2 or 3 people because there's no time. That's not how it works in the Battle of Ideas, particularly if Claire is chairing. So many people throw their ideas on the table, and then the speakers address the ones that they want. So the audience is actually participating. It's not just the role of I'm going to ask a question and it's going to be answered. So when you are in the audience, you don't see it as I'm a spectator. So because I'm a diva elitist, I never go to conferences if I don't speak. In the Battle of Ideas, I wouldn't mind, because you do have this idea that you participate in the whole process. In terms of what you said of questioning cultural certainties, the Battle of Ideas was the first space where I heard someone talk against the misanthropy of environmentalism. I didn't even know that such a thing existed. And in terms of the civilizing disagreement, those of the people who've read Atlas Shrugged, you know about Atlantis. That's how I felt intellectually every time I would go to the Battle of Ideas. And I would see every time when we would leave on Sunday night, I would go on Twitter and I would see people using the hashtag saying the same thing, that these 2 days now have given me the ammunition, not only intellectual ammunition in terms of ideas, because courage is contagious, have given me the courage to go back with a new fervor. So, and you wouldn't necessarily agree with each other. I disagree with various things with Claire or Mo, but it doesn't matter. So before we wrap up, people who watch the Daily Objective know that I like shorter episodes. Before we ask about what would be the highlights of this, just a quick announcement. First, a huge thank to our super chatters. Thank you, Marilyn. Thanks for everyone who is tuning in and who is supporting us. And to remind people that first of all, the Ayn Rand Center UK is going to be there with a table with a lot of our people. The Ayn Rand Institute is also a partner. So Yaron, Don, and myself will be a speaker, and so will Razi. In terms of taking the audience seriously, there's also a second Battle of Ideas somewhere more towards the north. In the UK, when they say the north, they mean a bit above London. So don't think it's in Scotland. It's in Buxton, which is somewhere between, let's say, London and Manchester, I think. I was there last year. And again, the idea is we think that people are capable of thinking and capable of being part of this discussion. Mo, what's the date of the Buxton conference?
It's the 5th of November, so you have to remember the 5th of November, Nikos. And it's Buxton in the High Peak District in a beautiful building called the Devonshire Dome, which so many people are going to make a whole weekend of it. It's a one-day festival, but it's a lovely place to come and spend the weekend. And although it's one day, there's less sessions. It's a very lively audience. We have the same high-quality speakers, and we have an even higher quality audience than in London. I'm just kidding, but it is a really good special event there, and that's on the 5th of November.
And so be sure if you are anywhere in the north, but even in London. So last year from York, it took me something like 2 hours to travel there. It's definitely worth it. The building has this huge dome, so it's not only the discussions, it's a very interesting and a very interesting environment. Another announcement before we mention some of the highlights of this year's Battle of Ideas, and then we wrap up. Today, Razi reminds me, is the premiere of the channel of the Ayn Rand Center on YouTube, where there's going to be shorter videos. I hope I'm describing it right. So Daniel, remind the audience with a link in our chat how they can watch the premiere, which is today at 15:2. So hope I said this right. Okay. So this year's Battle of Ideas, I will be in a panel on climate change in terms of how we understand it, and also on a panel on critical race theory. Yaron is going to be on a panel on the American midterm politics. Don, I don't remember what panels he's in. Again, there are too many of us. And Raz is in a panel on football. Raz is the only person literally in Europe who was in support of the Football Super League. So make sure you don't miss them. Except from that, Mo, what are some highlights in this year's Battle of Ideas?
Well, for me, the geopolitical sessions will be really important. Understanding what the war in Ukraine means, understanding its implications across the world, but particularly in Europe. So that's one where I'm going because I want to understand that a little bit better. There's a you mentioned about the strands. Some people go through the whole strand, you know, the same strand all day. I don't. I tend to mix and match. So I'll be going to some of the arts and humanities session. Who's defending the liberal arts today? And that's a subject that is quite close to my heart. But I'll also be going to a lot of the economy sessions about the cost of living crisis and what do we mean by economic growth, inflation, stagflation, because that's something I know less about. So you can kind of chop and change like that, go into things that are a passion and things that you just want to kind of talk about more with people.
Claire, any highlights for this year? I assume you are again chairing most of the keynotes. So
I'm chairing some of them, but what I wanted to actually say is that Don is actually speaking on a panel that I'm really interested in, which is on the infantilization of adults, and I think that whole sort of cultural trend of the collapse of adult authority and young people being given rights and what that means. That's like fascinating. And actually Yaron is on a second panel, which is entitled Revolting Parents, which is obviously a play on words, but it's actually about some of the crisis in schools, looking at the way in America, parents have had to really rebel against teachers indoctrinating their kids with some of the most egregious ideas around, as I said earlier, about identity politics. That's coming over to the UK. So Yaron's on that. I think that with war at the heart of Europe, this does change the geopolitical landscape, as Mo indicated. So we've got lots of very strong speakers and sessions on that. I'm more involved in the culture wars debates and the free speech debates. They're the kind of things I'm chairing. But it's interesting because we're starting the festival with a does the culture wars matter keynote. I mean, that's one of the sessions I'm chairing, and it's interesting because we're in the middle of this economic crisis. I mean, in the UK at least, it feels people are kind of predicting Armageddon in terms of the economy. But in all seriousness, the whole of the Western world, Europe, well, the whole world, we are entering into a serious situation, a scary situation in some ways, without scaremongering. And the culture wars can then seem a bit superficial, and why are you going on about what pronouns you use, or why are you rambling on about whether there's a kind of lessons on critical race theory? I mean, why is Nikos bothering with that session? There's more important things like cost of living and getting the heating to work. That's true, but actually, or I understand the sentiment, but that's precisely what the Battle of Ideas intends to do, which is the culture wars is not just some silly name-calling exercise. A lot of people think it's just the right, and sometimes actually there are very silly people on the right who just kind of become cultural warriors at the most superficial level. But there's a genuine war over culture. There's a genuine war over history, over the individual, over what society represents. And so to say, oh no, the economy is what matters and culture wars are silly is, I hope, going to be dealt with firmly by recognizing that both of those things are very important. So my highlights will be the free speech and the culture wars issues, whilst understanding that the economic situation we face and the geopolitical situation we face means that we are entering the Battle of Ideas at never a more serious time. The world is changing enormously, and I want to be in charge of how some of those changes happen rather than watching it as a bystander.
And you said the importance of culture. There's this famous saying, politics is downstream from culture. We say, and culture is downstream from philosophy. And all these things, again, are going to be covered in the Battle of Ideas. So my parting words, you mentioned about the topic of the infantilized adults. Your phrase, Claire, that has stuck with my mind, what you would tell to me and Ashley when we'd say, oh, we're not sure if you can see, your line was, get over yourself. For some reason, this, in my mind, it became like a motto. Like, you know what, grow up. When you grow up intellectually, you also grow up in terms of, it's what you said. Yeah, I can take care of my life. I can take care of myself. I think that the world makes sense and I can shape it. So I mentioned in the beginning the idea of human agency. You are a big believer in that. And this is rare. And this is something that I didn't understand 12 years ago. But by coming into contact with the ideas in the Battle of Ideas, but also with people who actually applied to their lives, that's how it became such an important and life-changing experience for me. And also, you mentioned the ideas that are being exchanged. The viewers of this channel have probably watched my episode, the one lecture that changed my life. It was by Frank Furedi, not in the Battle of Ideas, but in the Academy, about existentialism and humanism. So sometimes you come across with one idea by one person, which is so strong that makes you start the process of a U-turn. So the process of me actually believing in human agency was this one lecture by Frank at the time where I was a Stalinist, a determinist. But sometimes it takes one very powerful message and you start rethinking things. So this is the power of this of the Battle of Ideas, of the whole community around it. So a reminder to our friends, it's next weekend it's Saturday and Sunday in the center of London in a very nice location. You can still apply. You can either apply for a 1-day pass or for a 2-day pass. If you're a member of the Ayn Rand Center UK, there's a discount code, and Daniel has put it in the chat. So I hope I've covered everything. Again, myself, Yaron Brook, and Don Watkins and Razi will be there. And also our community, there's going to be a table. So Mo and Claire, parting words.
Well, first of all, I hope you come. I just wanted to even say, we've even got special cheap tickets for students, which you can then also get reduction on using your a special code that Nikos mentioned. And if you're under 30 and you work in science and technology, we have a special reduction price. And if you're a school student under the age of 18, you can get 1 day free. So, I mean, just in case anyone of that age looking, yeah, I mean, I know that some of you are international. Don't get put off. People come from all over the place, from all over Europe. Some people fly in from Germany, Sweden. We've got international speakers. So don't be put off by that, because the more of an international flavor, the better. But I'm just looking forward to meeting you all, and I really want to thank Nikos and Razi for really being supportive in a genuine sense. They know we don't agree on everything, but we still can be comrades in intellectual terms and colleagues in terms of really making change a possibility. So thanks for that.
A genuine thank you in return, because when I say that it has changed my life, I totally mean it. Mo, any parting thoughts or something that we have forgotten to put on the table?
Well, Claire rounded that up quite nicely. I was just going to give you our website address. It's www.battleofideas.org.uk, and you can see the full programme for the 2 days there and the huge array of speakers, as Claire mentioned earlier, international and UK homegrown as well. And look out for us on Twitter. We tweet it at ACAD of Ideas. Claire and I will be around. Any questions, just reach out. And it's the thing is, as well as being intellectually brilliant and changing your life and all the things, you make a lot of good friends as well. You know, it's a friendly conference. People don't sit in the corner on their own unless they really want to. It is it's an event, it's an experience, so do come along.
Yeah, some of the best discussions and Battle of Ideas take place in the outside space where it's like the smokers area, and even if you don't smoke, it's a fun place to be in. Okay, so see you all next weekend. Before we say goodbye, let's see if there is any last announcement. Yes, 10 p.m. UK time today. There's the show Life on Earth with Robert Nassif. The topic today is Love Conquers All, indeed. And again, in 10 minutes, there's the debut of the channel with the shorter videos. Daniel knows more about that. So thank you, Claire. Thank you, Mo. Follow Mo on Twitter. Follow Claire. Even if you're not in the UK, Claire posts some nice highlights from the House of Lords. As you said, Claire, you steer it up. And it's a good way to figure out what's happening in the UK and what is the political and cultural atmosphere. So see you all next week in the Battle of Ideas. Again, the intellectual event of the year for me in London, the thing I'm always looking forward to. And it will be great to see you there. Thanks, everyone, and goodbye.
Thanks, Nikos.